anybody who is my generation or a little younger, their favorite movie is Ferris Bueller. And in Ferris Bueller, there is this scene.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
Okay. Art Laffer, who the Laffer curve is named after. Welcome to the program. Hi, Art.
Thank you. It's so good talking to you, Glenn. You're a hero of mine.
Thank you. You are mine as well. So, Art, you are always the most optimistic guy because you have gone into countries that have collapsed and turned it around. So I know we can do it. I'd like to ask a couple of things. What your feeling is with all of the pressures that are, we're shutting off energy. We are on the verge of a war. I hope to God not. We have a possible banking collapse in our horizon. I hope to God not. And inflation. So what is your outlook? And then what are the most important things that we should do to encourage Congress and look for in the next president?
Well, let me just say the things you listed there, we are in those troubles. We do have a banking crisis. We do have inflation. We do have a very muddled policy of the government. And there is a land war in Europe that is going on that's quite serious and is threatening. All those true. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be true going forward. Just when we came into office on January 20th, 1981, Glenn, we had Jimmy Carter. We had four presidents, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Carter, what I call the Four Stooges. The largest assemblage of bipartisan ignorance ever on planet Earth. The economy had tumbled. The stock market had fallen from 1966 to 1982. The stock market fell by like 65% in real terms. So we were at the tail end of a really bad hurricane, but we could turn it around. And I think right now is the same way. I'm feeling very depressed about the policies that are going on, as you mentioned, and everyone knows all of them every day, all the time. Biden wants more taxes. His budget's $6.9 trillion. You have people flipping you off all around the world. It is a bad picture, but right now I feel that this is the time for a cataclysmic change in U.S. policies and gives us the opportunity to really change the face of the earth, all for the better. And I think the election of 2024 portends to be a really good election for truth, beauty, and the American way. That's me talking.
Right.
Now, the Republicans are right now as much a problem as are the Democrats. Don't think of this in Republican-Democrat terms. Think of this in pro-growth, pro-freedom, tax cut, controlled spending, sound money. Think of it in those terms, not in terms of parties. And I think we can do it, Ben. Glenn.
That's
a friend.
That's my friend who's trying to buy a car, and his wife doesn't know about it.
No, I was thinking of Ben Stein. Okay. I played that video, that clip.
So that's all right. So, by the way, have you talked to Ben recently? He's such a great guy.
I talked to him about 6 months ago. I spent a lot of time with him, and he wasn't doing well at the time. He was not well.
Oh, if you talk to him, say hi to him for me, will you?
I sure will. He's a great guy.
Great guy. Such a great guy. All right. So, Art, can we just take this apart here for just a second? Have you seen, and I'm not talking about what we can do, because I do believe if we unleash the ingenuity of the American people, really free them, and then, stop all this insanity, we can rescue our country. I agree with that. But have you ever seen us in this kind of situation historically where we seem to have all of the decks stacked against the Republic?
Yeah, I think when I mentioned 1980, before 80, I think it was all stacked against us. It was really depressing, Glenn. I know you were really young then, maybe not even born yet.
No, I was.
But the world was really grisly. It was dark. It was grim.
But we didn't have
belief.
We didn't have the debt that we have now. We didn't have the...
Oh, there are differences. They're true, but we also didn't have the tax rates then that we have now. Our tax rate now, highest income tax rate, 37%. Back then it was 70%, Glenn. We had in 1976, now that's just a little bit before, every single state in the United States except Nevada had a death tax. Every single one. Today, 33 states have gotten rid of their death taxes. So there are lots of things. I mean, pollution. I come from Cleveland, Ohio. Lake Erie, back then when I was a kid, to prove that you were the Christ, you wouldn't have to walk on the water. Hell, anyone could do that. You got to think in it. We had smog in L.A. We had, 25 three-stage smog alerts, and then, we were facing a horrible enemy at that time in 1980. Russia wasn't a joke back then like it is now. I mean, so, I think these times, we all tend to think of our own time as being the worst ever, but it's just as bad back then. And partisanship was horrible post-Nixon. I don't know if you remember, Democrats hated Republicans like mad. They wanted to kill every Republican. Yeah. It was just like it is now. I mean, there wasn't a civil libertarian. There wasn't a libertarian, a private person in the place that wasn't pilloried by the lefties. And that's the same thing now. Crime was horrendously high back then. Well, I'm not, don't mean to be lecturing at you, but these are very bad times today, but bad times lead to great changes in public policy. If you look at the long picture, we're winning, we're not losing. The conservatives in this world are winning big time.
Do you see, and you don't have to name, but do you see one or more politicians that could actually be a Reagan and pull this off?
I see tons of them who could be. The potential here in these people, there are some really qualified people. They have flaws and stuff like that, but they move. I want to see people who can read and can learn from their own mistakes and other people's mistakes to do a better job, not a doctrinal locked in the mud, type of people. Reagan learned a lot. When he was governor, he was the biggest tax increaser ever. He passed all the anti-abortion statutes in the state of California. He chaired the Equal Rights Amendment. He was a union leader. It called nationwide strikes. And Reagan became the best president because he learned. But I see people like DeSantis. I see people like Cruz. I see people, even Trump. I see people all over the place that have the potential of being a great president. And as a Democrat, let me just put you, there's a guy who's governor of Colorado named Jared Polis, who is doing an amazing job. He did not do a lockdown in Colorado. He did not. He was right along with the Republican governors. He wants to get rid of the income tax there. He's cut property taxes. He shipped groups of illegal immigrants to Chicago and New York. I mean, there are people all around who have the potential of being great.
So, Art, when you look at what's happening with the Federal Reserve, when you were with Reagan, interest rates were 18 or 19%, if I remember right?
Yeah, 21.5% when we took office on January 20th. There you go.
21 would...
Don't miss the half.
I know. 21.5. You are... That would kill everything in America today. How... When you look at the Fed and they were saying, oh, this is transitory, and now it's not, and you've got the banking crisis that's just underlying everything right now, and they still raise the rates, that should tell you they're freaking out now about inflation. Is that true or not?
Well, I think there's a difference today than there was then. And let me do the one today. The Fed has made huge mistakes of keeping interest rates at 0% for a long time. And banks have developed their portfolio strategies, all their actions based upon zero interest rates. So now once they've made the mistake of thinking the world is zero interest, and they've got those portfolios, there's no way we can adjust back to market rates without having grave ramifications in the banking system and other financial institutions as well.
So how do we
correct
that?
The sooner we get out of the business of controlling interest rates, the better off we'll be.
So that's
free markets should do that, not some Jay Powell whose credentials are nothing like Volcker's or Greenspan or McChesney Martin's. I mean, these people are not the competent gravitas people of the past.
You now have the Central Bank of Switzerland guaranteeing Credit Suisse. Germany Central Bank said, if there's problems with Deutsche Bank. And so everybody is doing this. Yeah. How do you reverse that?
Yeah, I know. It's tough once you're in the soup. It's like, and this is an example of, if I remember correctly, you told me once that you were an alcoholic and you got rid of it. Mm-hmm. And, it's going cold turkey. Mm. You got to stop drinking.
What is
and
it?
When you have a state-running monetary system, which it should not be there, when you have a state running every tax, every government spending, just stop already. Two people standing there, Glenn. One's been a lifelong smoker and the other one's never had a cigarette. And you ask them both to not smoke for the next 3 months. For the guy who's never had a cigarette, that's fine. Let's go. I'm fine with that. The guy who's a 3-pack-a-day smoker, oh, my God, it's the end of the... We have allowed ourselves to be addicted to socialist economic policies over the last 20-plus years, and it's wreaking havoc on the U.S. How do we get back to free markets? And I know of only one way of getting back to free markets is doing it right now. The Fed's balance sheet is almost $9 trillion.
I know.
I mean, we have a budget proposed of $6.9 trillion. We have a national debt of 125% of GDP. All of these things, Glenn, need to be stopped. Now, how do you stop it? You stop it by going cold turkey. Now, when we got in, we went a little cold turkey with you. If you remember 1980, 81, 82, 83, it wasn't the prettiest period.
No, it wasn't.
But tell me how you liked the story and the ending of that story.
I did.
Wasn't it beautiful?
Yeah. So Art, hang on. Can you hang on just for 1 minute?
Sure.
I want to come back. 1 minute with Art Laffer. He's an economist who actually has experience of fixing these things, and he's always optimistic, even when he tells you bad news. Art Laffer is with us. Art, What does a banking collapse that includes, all of Europe's banks as well? What does that look like when it happens? I don't think America has ever seen that. Maybe in the 1930s, but not a global collapse like this.
We saw it back in the 19th century. We saw a number of them. We did see in the 30s as well. Okay. I mean, the government of the U.S. confiscated all private holdings of gold in March of 1933 at $20.67 an ounce. 6 months later, they raised the price of gold from $20.67 to $35. It was the biggest wealth tax ever. We devalued the dollar against the British pound, the German mark, the French franc. I mean, we have seen really horrible things in our past. And the nice thing about crises is that they're over quickly. We had a crisis in 2007, 2008 when Obama came into office and the Democratic Congress there and the tax increases and all that. But we tried to save losers. And when you try to save losers, you guarantee there are no winners. And at the beginning of the world of 2008 is when the U.S. started in its long secular decline. And it really did. It was W and Obama combined. They're both ridiculous. I mean, the Bobbsey twins, I call them. The ridiculous policies that started the long decline of America, which we are experiencing right now. But prior to that, I mean, when we came into office, Glenn, when we came into office on January 20th, 1981, we'd had a long decline in America.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there was just a short, brief respite of sunshine with John F. Kennedy for, 3 years in office when we had the tax cuts and growth. But before that, it was all horrible, Glenn. I mean, since 1929, it had been horrible. So we can reverse this. And we just need someone to come in with the fortitude and vision of low-rate, broad-based, flat taxes.
So I know after Woodrow Wilson, Silent Cal came in, and he cut the size of the government, and he cut the size of taxes. He cut both of them in half, and then I think half again a year or so later.
He did. Yeah. It was called the Roaring Twenties. Hello? Right. We ran budget deficits, budget surpluses for 11 years straight.
Right.
11 years straight.
It's crazy.
God, It was just amazing.
So how do you sell that? I mean, it was easier to sell that around the turn of the century when people understood the federal government was not something that should be growing out of control. These progressive ideas were all new ideas.
Well, the selling of it is a funny animal, and let me give you an example of the sort of my philosophy on selling things. Is every election is a referendum on the incumbent. If the incumbent's great, why change a renter? Keep going. And what happened in 1980 is Jimmy Carter had failed miserably. We had Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Carter, those four stooges I mentioned to you. And Ronald Reagan was selected at that time as being better than the incumbent.
Right.
And came in and then did change the policies. The election of 1984, where we won 49 out of 50 states, that was an election pro-Reagan. Then the election of 88 was pro-Reagan. I think you've got a very weak president right now. I think people don't like him. I don't think they relish his competence. I don't think of him as a good leader. They don't think of him as a good leader of the country. So we have a real opportunity to take advantage of a rejection of an incumbent president, rejection of an incumbent Congress, House, and Senate. And I think we have a real chance of flipping the system. Now all we need to do is get someone in there who understands pro-growth, free market economics.
Well, Laffer Associates.
But we will. I think we will.
Laffer Associates founder and chairman Art Laffer. Thank you, sir, for your friendship, but more importantly, thank you for your optimism and your hard work that truly has saved the West for a long time. Thank you, Art Laffer.
The Glenn Beck Program.